It's back and bigger than ever before. How's it going, guys? I'm Aaron from PhoneDog.com, and the second version of the Samsung Galaxy Note is finally here. This is the Note 2, and it's coming to the States in November on AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, and US Cellular with 4G LTE connectivity, or in T-Mobile's case, HSPA+. This is the international version, and we're going to take a look in the full review. But first, special thanks to Best Buy Mobile for giving us devices like this and the Galaxy S3 and more for use in our One-Pawed Bandit giveaway game. When you walk into Best Buy Mobile, you'll walk out working to help you set up your email, your web, your contacts. When this thing comes out, the S Pen and more at Best Buy Mobile. Let's take a look. Is this the ultimate device? Is this even better than the Galaxy S3? Or is the Galaxy S3 the device to go with, or perhaps the One X? We'll find out in the full review, which starts right now. In some ways, it looks like a Galaxy S3, but in other ways, it's redefining smartphones as we know it, or at least adding a new type of smartphone to the market. This is the Samsung Galaxy Note 2. This is the second iteration of the device that was announced last year at IFA. This one was announced this year at IFA in Berlin, and it's coming in November to a bunch of carriers in the States. It's coming to Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, and US Cellular. And features-wise, it's very similar. Think of it like a supercharged Samsung Galaxy S3 in a lot of ways, because while it does some enhancements, look at it two ways. One, as a kind of a successor of sorts, or a different alternative to the Galaxy S3, and in other ways, it's a refresh of the Galaxy Note, and it brings in a ton of new, awesome software features. Let's do a quick hardware run-through here. It's got a 1.6 gigahertz quad-core Exynos processor, and I'll note to you that this is the actual, no pun intended, I'll note to you, that this is the international version, this is not the US version. That said, what's really cool about this is they're not changing very many of the specs when it comes to the US. It will have 4G LTE connectivity on every carrier, with the exception of T-Mobile. It'll have HSPA+, 42 megabits per second capabilities on T-Mobile, but processor staying the same. 1.6 gigahertz quad-core Exynos processor in this device. It's got a little bit of a bigger display, a 5.5-inch Super AMOLED HD display that's notable in the fact that it does not have pen tile. So unlike the original Galaxy Note, this one does not have pen tile technology. It has an 8-megapixel camera with 1080p HD video recording, and then it's got a front-facing camera as well, a giant 3,100 milliamp hour battery, which, yeah, you know what, LTE is going to take its toll, but that's a huge battery, 3,100 milliamp hours, and I'll tell you, not to spoil it, but to tell you a little bit of a preview of sorts, in my testing, battery life has been absolutely fantastic. That said, this is not running LTE, since it's an unlocked version. I'm maxing out at HSPA+ on AT&T. It's also running Android 4.1, known as Jelly Bean, with the newest version of TouchWiz, the Nature user interface version, and you can see as it looks right here. And I've got the time and the nice lock screen with all the different benefits of the Galaxy S3. So take a look at the Galaxy S3 review if you're new to this series, because even though the Galaxy Note 2 is different, I'm not going to rehash on all the software features that are present both on this device and on the Galaxy S3. But really impressed with this phone. It is taller and narrower, so even though it has a larger display, 5.5 inches here compared to the original, where you can see, bam, a little bit taller and a little bit more rounded, but you can see there's a slight size difference. This one was always kind of hard to hold in the hand, hard to wrap your fingers around. This one resembles much more, or looks much more like a Galaxy S3, as you can see here with the overall design. So just to give you a recap of the design here, it comes in two colors. It comes in this gray and comes in white. It's got two capacitive buttons down here, a physical home button, which you can double tap to hit S Voice, which we'll talk about more in part 2. You've got your 3.5mm headphone jack up top, your volume rocker over here on the left side, power button on the right side, camera on the back, obviously, and a micro USB charging port at the bottom. Now, a couple of improvements, actually a lot of improvements. One of those, though, is the S Pen. Not only has the S Pen been improved itself, but there are some neat features. For example, when you pull the S Pen out, it automatically detects that the S Pen has been pulled out, and it brings up what's called Page Buddy. So you'll notice I have my 7 home screens here. It brings up a Page Buddy where I can access all of the features of the S Pen here. I don't know why I'm doing it that way, because I'm left-handed. But it brings up all the features of the S Pen, and very similar as well, when you put in your headphones, it'll bring up another Page Buddy page down here. And you're also going to see some of the stuff from the Note 10.1 if you watch the review that I did of that. You're going to notice some of the things that have been carried over to the Note 2. For example, take a look at the cursor here, and you'll see that as I get close to the notifications bar, for example, or the S Pen menu, you'll see that little cursor hovering around on the device. One of the improvements, also, the S Pen is longer now and easier to hold in the hand. We'll talk more about that later in the review. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff later in the review, so stand by because we've got an exciting part 1 and a part 2. So just to give you a recap here, international device, like I said, 7 home screens out of the gate. So this is pretty stock Android 4.1. Where you're going to see the differences here, especially if you've worked with the Galaxy S3 or some of the other newer Samsung devices recently, take a look at this. You'll see the notifications bar is entirely new and it's optimized obviously for Jelly Bean. You've got your clock up here and your date and stuff, and your signal, or excuse me, your settings button up there at the top. You've got the typical Samsung stuff here: Wi-Fi, GPS, mute shortcuts, screen rotation, Bluetooth. But you're going to see this cool one called blocking mode, which we'll talk about shortly. Power saving, all share, cast, sync. And you'll notice here this is a slight difference from the Galaxy S3. You've got a brightness indicator here with the ability to check it for auto. Now, obviously, because I'm doing a video, I have automatic brightness turned off. And you'll see the network ID down here, AT&T microcell. Since AT&T coverage is kind of poor in my office, I have to use a microcell. But you've got 5 buttons down here, including the apps button, which can't be moved. But you can customize Chrome, messaging, contacts, and phone as you see fit. And then, of course, you have a very customizable lock screen over here as well. So like I said, it's a bigger device. It's definitely noticeably huge. Compare this to the iPhone 5, where literally the entire device fits in the display of the Samsung Galaxy Note 2. So it's a much larger device. It's meaty. It's hard, in the hand for a lot of people. It's going to be hard to hold. That said, this is intended to be a tablet kind of phone hybrid. And I think for a lot of people, this is going to do a great job because it's borderline unable to be pocketed, but you can hold it in the pocket, and even though it sticks out about that much out of my pocket when I'm sitting down. Even though it does that, it's still nice to have the functionality of a device with a larger display and some of the features, which we'll talk about briefly. First of all, I want to jump into the settings because there are some cool features that have been included with the Galaxy Note 2. Obviously, you've got your typical Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, data usage stuff here, but these are cool. Home screen mode, you may have remembered this from the Stellar because you had a basic mode and an easy mode. They were obviously marketing it towards first-time smartphone buyers. Well, that carries over, at least on the international version, to the Galaxy Note 2. You can see I can customize it and make it an easy mode over here as well, and customize it and make it for somebody that might be new to a smartphone, maybe somebody that has a hard time seeing. They buy this device for the size of the display because it's a little bit easier to work with, and they want it to be easy. I can see a certain use case for that. And then blocking mode down here, this is pretty useful as well. Think of this like Apple's Do Not Disturb. When this mode's enabled, notifications will be disabled. And of course, you can disable incoming calls when it's turned on, notifications, alarm, and timer, and then the LED indicator. And you can set it from, let's say, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. I don't want anything to come through. And then you can do a loud contact. So if you have significant other, you have husband, wife, fiance, whatever the case may be, boyfriend, girlfriend, you can set those to go through along with family and other important calls from friends. And you can put those in the allowed contacts list below. So some nice customization there, and of course you can access that like I showed you a minute ago from the notifications bar and just easily turn that on and off as you see fit. Now down here, sound display, battery, and this is something we'll talk about in part 2. The battery has been exceptional on this device, 3,100 milliamp hour battery. Now granted, I am running HSPA Plus or HSPA or 3G depending on where I'm at in the city, but I will tell you, I've made this thing go to 28 to 29 hours and still have 18 or 17% left on the battery. It's impressive to say the least. This is the first device. I took this on a business trip last week to New York and was absolutely impressed with the battery life. Hardcore use when it comes to calling, text messaging, email on that day, and I was able to make it through the full day, and actually into the next day. I flew back to the office and still had charge. I was at like 17 or 16% when I got back to the office. Very impressive, to say the least. Now, this is also something you'll notice with Jelly Bean. The accounts are grouped a little bit differently. All my Google accounts are grouped in one Google folder: Twitter, Facebook, and I can add accounts there. Now, motion, cool as well. We've seen this stuff before. Direct call, smart alert, double tap to top, where I can tap the top of the display. Quick glance, check key information. I can show you this one as well and check that one and take advantage of that. Pan to browse images. I can shake to update. So a lot of the stuff that we remember from the Galaxy S3 here. Smart alert, where when I pick up the device, even if I don't turn the display on, if I have a missed call, it'll vibrate. All of those are very cool. Of course, palm swipe to capture a screenshot, just like that. And then, of course, palm touch to mute and pause. And again, the Jelly Bean updates, one thing I really like here, take a look at this, and you can see it shows a preview of the screenshot. I can delete and edit or share it from the notifications bar. So this is really useful in applications like Foursquare as well, when somebody checks in nearby, and I can immediately, from the notifications bar, like it or comment on it. So I can really see they're enhancing the usability here across the board with Jelly Bean, and TouchWiz really does play nice with Android 4.1. They've done a great job of refining the user interface, making it easy to use, and making it play really well with Android 4.1. So S Pen functionality here as well. Dominant hand, I'm left-handed, so I should actually change that. I have pen attach and detach sound, which I have the sounds turned off, which you can see makes this little noise. I don't know if you can hear it on camera, but It makes a little noise. Open pop-up note when the pen is detached. I can open up a note to take quick notes. Battery saving, S Pen keeper. This is when I walk away with the device without attaching the pen, so if I turn that on and I get too far away from the pen, it'll say, hey, you're leaving the pen, which is cool because, I'll be honest, there have been times where I've dropped the pen under my desk, I've gone home and forgotten. I've been like, oh, I'll pick that up after I'm done shooting video or working or done with this call, whatever, and I've gone home for the night and been like, oh, wait a second, my pen's not there. So, all very nifty there. And of course, Air View, which I'll show you in just a second when the pen is held near the screen. It brings up previews and more. So quick command settings. There are a lot of different enhancements. And like I said, you know, Android is at the point now, and not just Android, but smartphones as a whole are at the point where really, and I'll go into messaging while we're talking about this, smartphones are really at a point where, you know, it's all about software. Hardware is kind of the same. It's dual-core, quad-core X processor, X amount of RAM, which this has 2 gigabytes, by the way. Large display, and they're having to distinguish themselves by different methods other than hardware, rather. And I think for a lot of manufacturers, not just Android OEMs, but OEMs in general, are having to distinguish themselves amongst software. And this is something I praise the Galaxy S3 for. I will praise the Galaxy Note 2 for as well. Software is absolutely fantastic. You can really tell that they put a lot into the software of this device, and I think for somebody that's going in and they see 47 different Android devices, it's going to be less about the specs, because honestly, One X, Galaxy S3, Note 2, all very similar in a lot of ways in terms of specs. It's kind of like a Ferrari versus a Porsche versus something else, a Lotus or something like that. Car people are going to be like, that's a terrible comparison, but you get my point. They're all kind of similar in a lot of ways. It's going to be the software and what you enjoy combined with the ecosystem. So here is your here's your messaging indicator, or your messaging prompt. You can see I can choose the input method. I actually have 2 Samsung keyboards on the international version, Chinese and the typical Samsung keyboard. And then I've done a little of this Jelly Bean keyboard that I always get from the Android market, and it's worked relatively well. Now 5.5-inch display here. I need to turn screen rotation on. Pretty decent across the board with that. So you can see, you know, pinch to zoom, relatively responsive across the board, which I'll show you in just a second. As I've been browsing, been relatively impressed with that. But overall responsiveness in general with this device has been pretty fantastic. So the quick brown fox, little to no lag whatsoever, other than my terrible typing, is ready for a cup of coffee. Quick brown fox is ready for a cup of coffee, and of course you can use the S Pen as well. You can write on the display. I'll show you that one. So you can take a look. S Pen has been detached. This is part of the new feature set that comes with Android 4.1 and with the Note 2, obviously as a result of the S Pen. So you can see I'm hovering over stuff now. And I love the fact that it brings up recommended shortcuts. When I pull up the S Pen, when I plug in my headphones, I do certain things like that. It'll bring up a list of recommended shortcuts. It's like, oh, I see you did that. Do you want to go to the gallery? Do you want to go to the phone app? Do you want to go to your Page Buddy? Do you want to draw something? Perhaps go to messaging. I see it as being really useful. So of course you can use the pen as well. And one thing I like is when the pen is close, take a look at the cursor there. I can't use the keyboard. So as soon as I move away, keyboard goes back into use. So that's kind of nice for those people that may have their hand nearby or holding onto the device or something and still wanting to use the pen. I can hold onto it and it doesn't activate based on my gesture. So you got that, but then I want to show you, of course, this as well. I'm going to Samsung keyboard, and I've got the ability to do this. Let's get this keyboard pulled up, and I can say, hey there. And I can use, if I really wanted to, I can use the S Pen to compose messages and more. We'll talk more about the S Pen in part 2, including some nice feature bonuses that have come as a result of this pen, and we'll continue on in our browser and the hardware test in part 2. Stay tuned.